All right. Well, welcome to our mid-afternoon session for Audio Reactive AR, a new paradigm to experience music with Tiago Correa, Chris Nunez, and BC Bierman. I'm just going to hand it off to you guys, and you can take it from here. You have a lap?
I do.
Okay.
Are these working? There we go. All right.
All right, I see Tiago.
Oh, there he is. Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Tiago.
Welcome. So welcome, Tiago from London. Welcome to everyone here, IRL. Again, lovely to be back in person. Chris and I have been doing this for going on 11 years. We actually met here.
Yep.
At this very conference when it was ARE a decade ago, and have been working together ever since.
It was before even the expo hall was in place. I think we met at a lunch table.
Yes.
Yeah.
Any OGs? Anybody remember the Avatar Hotel back in the day? All right. We got into the game because we believed in democratizing public spaces. And we pioneered the outdoor augmented reality street art mural a decade ago. And our core mission really centers around public spaces, public dialogue, interactivity, and using AR as that vehicle. Not AR alone, but certainly something that has allowed us to engage citizenry and artists in that space. That's not what we're here to talk about. We have moved into other verticals, and the other vertical that we've moved into is music, but again, working with artists, and also centering around how we can allow artists to interact with their fans and create a dialogue as opposed to sort of this one-way monologue. So that's just a quick setup in terms of our mission. I don't know if Chris has anything to add, and if not, we can sort of jump to Tiago, let him sort of introduce himself and what he does for Warner Music.
Yeah, I'll just make a quick intro. So yes, we've been in the AR space for a long time. I actually come from an entertainment legal background in Hollywood for about a decade, and now I run the Heavy Studio. And it was through our music partnerships that we got connected to Tiago. So we actually have a project in the works that we will touch upon the experience that we're building. We won't touch upon the actual brand because we haven't gotten the artist approval yet, but I will let your imaginations run wild that it is one of the biggest bands on the planet. Let me introduce Tiago Correa. So Tiago, if you could just give us a spiel, give everyone a spiel about what Warner's doing, what you're doing inside Warner.
Sounds good. Hey, everyone. Great to meet you all. I'm sad that I cannot be there in person, but I'm coming in spirit via the Zoom link. So great to meet you all. My name is Tiago. I work for a team called New Business and Ventures at Warner Music. And what we do is we look at new technology, new business models, new content formats, anything that we think can have an impact in the way that our artists do their work from a commercial perspective. So we define strategy for the company with regards to new technology. We go out and strike partnerships and agreements and deals with folks such as the heavy folks to allow our artists to make revenue in new ways and interesting ways that they haven't done before. And we make investments and other types of ventures that help further our goals and our artists' goals. And I've been doing that for almost 4 years at Warner.
So we initially were pulled in on this experience that we'll start talking about in greater detail through the marketing team. And that's a separate initiative or group than what Tiago works with innovation and tech partnerships. What started as a marketing campaign, we developed as an artistic pitch, and has since, I think, is going to evolve into a multi-artist experience. We liken it to an immersive visual Spotify. And we're creating an interactive walkthrough, play anywhere music video. We also have a partnership with Niantic that, they've now launched their Lightship technologies. We were one of the first early partners with them over a year now. Helped them build that SDK and their documentation, et cetera. Or we gave them feedback. We didn't help them build it. They are the tech experts. We are the artists that, we like to say that our mission is reality is our canvas and digital is our brush, and Niantic is making some pretty good brushes for us.
Yeah, so I want to pull back just a little bit and set up like this convergence, and I personally have been I guess we can call it preaching on ethics.
You're very preachy.
And emerging technologies, probably for 4 or 5 years, here, among other places. Served on several standards bodies, including the IEEE, around these issues of AI and ethics and XR technologies in particular. I've heard more and more of this talk, and I'm really encouraged by it. I heard some of it from John's keynote this morning, and again, really encouraged by that. I say that to say that we care about these technologies in so much as they serve a common good, and that they remain open. So what we've been seeing for a number of years is convergence, and convergence in particular with AI, XR technologies, and then of course blockchain. Blockchain with its power to decentralize communities is really what we find super fascinating. I think Chris can maybe speak more intelligently to that side of it. But in terms of music, I grew up in the 70s, and I had my uncles had this light box that they built in a shop, a wood light box, high tech for the time. And I would fall asleep at their house listening to Pink Floyd, and that light box would react to the music. That was my first taste of audio reaction, and it stuck with me ever since. So when we got a chance to work with this band, to be named later, unfortunately, we jumped at it, and we've been working on technically using AR and audio reaction to create a visual immersive experience. So almost like a future of immersive music videos. And we have two sort of verticals in that arena. One bespoke for artists, and another, a more general category, visuals for artists in AR that reacts dynamically to their music. So I think everyone sees a convergence that's happening, but ultimately we hope that music can be that art form that allows for more participatory, community building experiences. In a world where people talk about community building, and yet we seem to be more and more polarized each day. So we see it as something real that we can build around that's actually an authentically community building, because we've all experienced the show and had that moment in that show where it didn't matter who someone voted for, what their political leanings were, any other category that we put human beings in, we've sensed that sort of destructing of those divides, or deconstructing, I think is maybe a better word. And we see the convergence of these technologies really sort of pushing in that direction where we can actually put our money where our mouth is in terms of breaking down barriers. So if Chris or Tiago wants to speak more to the blockchain and NFT side of this, I think maybe that's a decent trajectory.
So this talk is a little bit experimental, so I think we'll apologize to you guys. We don't have a set agenda. This is designed to be sort of a fireside chat with Tiago. We sit on numerous Zoom calls with Tiago and other members of Rhino Records and Warner Music, and it's always an interesting conversation, but we've never done this in real time. So it's a little experimental, so I hope you'll bear with us. But Tiago, I'm curious. BC mentions NFTs. How many people have, I'm sure, heard NFT at least this talk? Okay. I don't know if anybody saw on my bio, I actually have an NFT as my LinkedIn avatar. I no longer use my photo for whatever reason. Just call it commitment, maybe, to the NFT space. But the NFT world, blockchain technologies, non-fungible tokens, et cetera, has really unlocked a lot of creative economy. And I think it's bringing almost a renaissance in the creative arts to the world. And music is one of those fundamental creative arts. And so I know, Tiago, you guys have very public investments in blockchain companies, and I'm curious if you have any thoughts that you could share on both maybe the NFT front specific to music.
Yeah, sure, of course. I mean, it's a topic that a lot of folks at Warner and beyond have heard me speak quite a lot. So it's not a new topic in any way for myself. And at least for me, it was a personal journey, talking a little bit about my own personal journey before going into the impact on the industry and what we think about music. it was a journey that started much before actually the NFT word was actually invented. I think the component parts of what NFTs and collectibles are all about were there in place much before 2017. They were living and breathing in games and other communities and ecosystems that have their own in-game economies that you could trade and buy and sell and in-game economies that also were community-driven and community-created. So for me, the click happened when I first saw CryptoKitties and how CryptoKitties took down the Ethereum network very briefly. And what I realized, again, personally then, was that a shift in consumer behavior was happening. And for a lot of us who are in the business, we know that the most difficult thing to see happen, is a natural consumer behavioral shift, right? So it's one of those rare things that if you're blessed to see it in action, you need to do something about it. And so what I started doing something about it was I started investigating and discussing and researching and exploring and talking way more than the average person should be talking about back in 2017 and 18 about CryptoKitties. That essentially rubbed some people in the correct way, I can imagine, and was what led us to later down the line invest in Dapper Labs relatively early on, an investment that we're not only very happy but very proud of, and has allowed us to learn a lot about the space. I think for us to really learn, and this is probably the thesis behind a lot of our investments, right? As a company which is a traditional music company, somewhat of a media incumbent, it's hard for us to know what these new spaces are all about until we dip our toes in the water. And investments are a very good way for us to dip our toes in the water and be able to learn about those spaces. And that's what we did with regards to digital collectibles. We learned, as soon as we dipped our toes in the water, we learned a hell of a lot. And we have since experimented, particularly in the world of music, having done what we think is the first ever music collectible, which was a collaboration between Muse, the British band Muse, and CryptoKitties with Dapper, as well as other experiments in the meantime. Personally, I think that the digital collectible space has been quite incredible towards the music industry. I think there has been a lot of incredible adoption from independent artists and operators out there, management out there, trying to push the boundaries and explore new avenues. So I'm really, really happy that after almost 2 years of randomly dropping the name CryptoKitties to every single conversation that I could, that early this year, a lot of people just started talking, hey, you were talking about NFTs and collectibles a while ago, weren't you? Tell me all about it. And it was very incredible to see the thirst and desire that the music industry had also to learn about the space and how it could help their distribution, their creativity, their work, and obviously also their communication with fans and monetization in general.
Yeah, that's actually something I'd like to push you on a little bit. You said that the behaviors are changing, and you saw that with the sort of the gamification of the blockchain space. And I'm wondering what that change in behavior is. I mean, listening to music is actually an enjoyable activity, often by yourself, sometimes at a concert, sometimes with family, et cetera. But sometimes, only sometimes, there's visuals associated. Sometimes it's just the audio. And I'm curious about how does Warner look at the visual side of things like what we're doing, with experimenting with you guys to create an immersive visual language that accompanies the music? Is it becoming more almost required that artists are multimedia? Or do you feel like there's any kind of purist tendency with music? Frozen.
Uh-oh. Question was so profound.
I wouldn't say that there's a purist tendency in music, but
Did we get it?
Okay.
can you hear me now? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Sorry about that. The question was indeed profound, but I don't think that there is any purist version of it. I mean, again, I'm not a purist with regards to audio only, and if there are any audio only purists in the room, I'm sorry if I'm going to offend you, but music and video have had a very long and fruitful marriage. Music and visuals have had a long, fruitful marriage for the longest amount of time, right? It's not something that started yesterday. It's not something that started with MTV. It's definitely not something that started with music videos. It started with music posters and other visual static references that alluded and helped shape what the live event was about, right? When music was only live. Then when music became either a print sheet or a record, the visuals of covers, gatefolds, sleeves, labels, book prints, etc., were always a very, very big part of the art form and the enjoyment around it. And then, yes, of course, pioneers such as the Beatles started exploring video as a means of promotion and attachment of a visual element to music. So I don't think it's something new at all, and I think it's something that every music company, any music artist, and any music operator will say hands down is a crucial part of how you consume music. Whether you want to consume music with visuals at that time or not, whether you just want to consume the visuals once and that's it, or whether you want to go back and enjoy the visuals and maybe engage with them in other ways, right? And I think the other ways are the ones that we're exploring these days. The other ways are the ones that right now are creating a little bit of waves around how they can influence music creation as well. Like that's things like immersive visuals and AR as we're talking today, but also 3D rendered objects, 3D rendered worlds, and 3D rendered experiences that accompany music. Because they are interactive, because they are participatory and not just a passive experience, that's why I think they are creating bigger waves than before, because they are allowing audiences and fans a different experience than the ones that the visuals had given music fans before.
I wanted to dig into that just a little bit. I mean, artists by nature are generally more experimental. Industries by nature generally aren't. And can you speak a little bit to the broader industry adoption of XR, its willingness to adopt maybe what might be a bit disruptive, and then maybe if we have time, we only have 2 minutes left, but speak to any artists, like any individual artists in particular that you see as being particularly progressive in XR.
I'm gonna have to, make the stance of defending the industry here a little bit. Yes,
Good.
I know that the industry has had its moments where it was anything but innovative, but I genuinely think that the industry is changing. Splash has changed, and for at least in my role, for every great idea that an artist has, I also count the same number of great ideas or good ideas that the industry has had, but for some reason wasn't able to move forward because either the artist didn't want it or the management didn't want it. So, I think it cuts both ways, right? It's about art, right? What we're doing, what the artists are doing and what we're working with is art. And because art is very subjective, it's always dependent on a direction of vision, and if those visions don't match for the opportunity and what the artist is trying to do, then those innovations or those opportunities might not happen, even though it would have been incredible to imagine them happening, right? And I have many stories of those that we'll never be able to tell because they just didn't happen. But I can tell you there were incredible, amazing ideas.
Hopefully that's not one of ours that you'll never be able to see. It's
Hopefully
close.
not.
We're very
Hopefully
close
not.
to releasing it. We thought we were going to release it yesterday, but in cooperation with Lightship's announcement, but we didn't make it. But I'm curious, Tiago, the consumer behavior, this idea that these behaviors are changing, I'm wondering how much of that is the recording industry actually pushing marketing out to us in the form of visuals versus now this interactivity or expected dialogue with the audience and having the audience actually participate in the experience?
Well, on that front, I can tell you that it's not the industry pushing, for sure. I think it would be wrong for me to say that we were successfully able to change consumer behavior like that. I don't think that that's at all what the industry is trying to do. It would be great if we could, because it would allow us to get into very honest and interesting conversations with audiences, right? Ones that would be able to experiment quite freely, and they would follow through to those areas that we wanted to experiment with. But no, the industry, the music industry particularly, is not playing catch up, but is trying to naturally be reactive, like everyone is. There are moments where we do become pioneers and try to do things to advance the conversation. But I think there are very rare moments where, again, as I mentioned before, really rare moments where consumer behavior can be shifted. Like, for example, what happened in 2017. It's not something that happens every year or every month. I think it's one of those, solar eclipses or asteroid belts coming close to Earth. It is really one of those freak accidents of nature that somehow gets all the stars aligned, and that's why we need to, in those cases, yes, still play catch up, yes, still be reactive, but doubling down. So I don't think the industry is changing consumer behavior, but it's definitely advancing the conversation, and it's doing it in a very honest and a very worthwhile way, right? In a way that brings artists along in the journey with them, because we're all learning, we're all discovering, we're all exploring all of these new areas, be it gaming, be it digital collectibles, be the immersive world that will indeed surround us. And with that, we're hoping to have a small participation in what will be eventually a consumer shift, but not be by any chance, by any measure, the sole reason for that consumer shift. You were talking about, and I'm sorry, I know that you were also pressed for time, but if I can, you were talking about Lightship from Niantic, and the vision there, for example, I think is one that requires a consumer shift, right? So it's the one where you'll experience an augmented world, which is not inside any specific device, but rather enhanced by that device and lives and breathes around you in the real world, right? I think for people to be able to really enjoy an augmented reality world, now that they are so used to and so accustomed to having all of their digital media and all of their digital experiences inside some device, it's going to take an interesting consumer shift for that to happen. But you see pieces of it happening, right? Pokemon Go definitely was a very big point in advancing that conversation. Whenever headsets become a very common part of our Discord and tech stack, it will be a very big part of the conversation. And the other part of the conversation is the content and the experiences that needs to get people living and breathing in the world around us. So I think it's not just for one player to take credit of advancing the conversation, or one industry to take the credit of advancing the conversation or moving consumer shift in behavior, but it's for many people to do so at the same time.
So
We're trying to save like a minute for, thank you, Tiago.
Yeah, hopefully we have some creators in the room that
minute for
just
questions.
kicked loose some questions around, so if anybody has any questions.
I think we have time for one question.
Anybody?
And can I just say,
Not
we did
you.
make it through an improvisational session without saying metaverse one time.
Woohoo, good job on that.
Thank you. Question? Yeah.
I hope this is relevant, but I'm really struggling with the idea of why couldn't a piece of music itself become an NFT?
It's a good question. I think everything so far that has been released as music NFT has had some attached visual media to it. But I do know, so NFTs can be a collectible or a property. They can also be, they can represent IP. They can act as tickets. They can serve multiple functions. I don't think we've seen it directly yet. There are people that are creating generative music that still have visuals attached to them. Tiago, are you guys experimenting with music only as NFT, or do you feel like there has to be some multimedia component?
No, I mean, I think the music only piece is out there already. There have been some collectibles launched which are music only. And by the way, when I say music only, typically there's always some element of visual, right? Whether that's a piece of artwork, right? Typically music only tends to be accompanied by some element of artwork, right? So, but the artwork is not necessarily the collectible piece of that collectible. The music tends to be. So that's already happened, and it is something that is not as common just because I think the perceived value of the music is not as common as the audiovisual standard pieces that we see so much in the collectible world and the art collectibles world. But I do think that it's possible. And if you look at, for example, a marketplace like OpenSea, there are thousands of creators putting out their music as collectibles, right? Again, typically accompanied by some sort of visual, but the visual does not typically constitute the collectible piece.
Thank you, Tiago.
Yeah.
And thank you so much, guys. That was great.
Yeah, so we really wanted to get Tiago's thoughts mostly. We're happy to talk about the AR art side of our experiences outside in the hall. So if you see us, just grab us. If you have questions, happy to talk.